This is TWiT.
Now, I don't know how many of you stay abreast of technology used to take a look at nuclear disasters, but it's difficult. You see, when we're talking about nuclear disasters, and there's been a couple of major nuclear disasters. Off the top of my head, there would, of course, be Fukushima, which everyone knows because that was just recently. There's Chernobyl, which is the worst nuclear disaster, unless, of course, Fukushima gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then there was 3 Mile Island here in the United States, which was actually big. I mean, when you consider what happened during the event, it was a loss of containment, just like Chernobyl and Fukushima. Not to the same extent, but still not good at all. Now, I'm not going to talk about nuclear disasters. I'm not going to talk about nuclear power. That discussion is for another time. What I want to talk about is what we do afterwards. One of the most difficult parts of cleaning up a nuclear disaster is finding and containing the fuel and the fission remnants. In other words, the things that are the most dangerous, the most radioactive. Now, the problem is we don't have really good ways to look at those remnants. We don't have a really good way to look into a nuclear disaster. The problem with doing that is that when you have a nuclear disaster, when you have something like a Chernobyl or Fukushima or a 3 Mile Island, you can't go inside. I mean, it kills people. It's not just the radiation, it's the radioactive dust, one particle of which launched in your lungs could literally kill you in days, weeks, or months. Now, we have tried a lot of different methods to get into the heart of these disasters. We've tried fiber optics, but they really can't get close enough. They don't have the directionality that we need in order to be able to get in there. They've tried using vehicles so that you could get people closer with lead shielding, but that's just not really practical. It's never really worked, and you're still putting people at risk. And, of course, we've tried robotics. Robotics sounds like the perfect way to get into a reactor room. It sounds like the perfect way to take a look at what has happened to the fuel in Chernobyl, which, by the way, has turned into something that looks a little bit like lava. They call it the elephant's foot. And essentially, it's the steel and the concrete that melted out of the bottom of that reactor vessel and has turned into some porous, nasty, fuel-containing death tow. Now, it's solidified, and now it's abrading, which means the particles are coming off, and those particles contain fuel. They contain remnants of the fission process. It's incredibly bad for you, but when you try to send robots near that ball of radioactivity, they tend to malfunction. You can harden the electronics at great expense, but even then, they found that it's very difficult to get a useful picture of what has happened to that fuel, what has happened to the machinery, what has happened to the debris within a reactor. That's why some very bright engineers have discovered that we can use a fundamental particle of physics to take a look at where robotics and humans dare not go. Now, you may have heard of a muon. Muon is a fundamental particle. It's created on Earth every single day, every single hour. It's what happens when cosmic rays interact with the molecules in the upper atmosphere. What you get is a high-energy burst and then the creation of muons. Now, it's estimated that about 10,000 muons hit every square meter of the Earth's surface every minute. Now, we mostly ignore them unless you're a particle physicist because they don't affect us. They don't change our lives. They're no danger to us or the materials that we normally come into contact with. However, there is one characteristic of a muon that is incredibly useful for people who are studying nuclear disasters. And that's the fact that a muon can be blocked or deflected by heavy elements like plutonium and uranium. What these fantastic engineers have figured out is if you place an array of detectors around the building, around the reactor that you're trying to take a look into, you can use an exposure over hours and days to develop a picture of what's happening inside. Now, imagine this. The picture is perfect because it's like an X-ray, but the X-rays, the muons, are only stopped by the fuel, not by the steel, not by the concrete, not by all that debris that has fallen into the reactor, but only by the stuff that you are most concerned with, the uranium and the plutonium that occurs because of the process of fission. Now, you set up these detectors around the building, and over time, because of the shadow, because of those particles being blocked, you can see from the absence of muons what's going on inside of the reactor. In the case of Fukushima, they were able to use this system to determine, maybe unsurprisingly, that there was no fuel in the reactor vessel because it had melted through the bottom. This is still technology in its infancy, but this type of technology has a lot of promise for those who want to study phenomenon and dangerous situations that are not themselves really, friendly to the technology that we've developed to monitor these kind of phenomenon. I think in the future, we're going to be looking at the use of muons and other fundamental particles to take a look into the secrets where we dare not tread.